Imagine walking through a silent valley at dusk, the air thick with the stench of death. Ahead, rows upon rows of wooden stakes, thousands of them, and on each stake, a body, pale, twisted, and swaying in the wind like grotesque puppets. Some are still alive, moaning faintly, begging for death. This was not the work of a monster from folklore. This was the work of a man. Vlad the Impaler, the real Dracula. Vlad III was born in 1431. In Transylvania, a land that seemed pulled straight from a nightmare. Misty mountains, thick forests, and constant war. His father, Vlad II, carried the title Dracula, meaning the dragon, from his membership in the Knightly Order of the Dragon, sworn to defend Christianity against the advancing Ottoman Turks. The boy inherited the name Dracula, literally, son of the dragon. Later, enemies would twist the meaning, son of the devil, a fitting name, they thought, for the horrors to come. Vlad's childhood was no fairy tale. There were no royal banquets, no carefree days within castle walls. At the age of 11, he and his younger brother Radu were taken as political hostages by the Ottoman Empire, pawns in a ruthless game of diplomacy. They were brought to Edirne, the heart of the Sultan's court, a place where luxury and terror walked hand in hand. There, Vlad was both a prisoner and a student. He learned the language of his captors, Turkish, along with mathematics, philosophy, strategy, and horsemanship, but his most vivid lessons were in cruelty. He witnessed executions without trial, floggings that left men broken, and impalements that haunted the imagination. These horrors weren't hidden. They were spectacles, carefully orchestrated performances meant to instill fear and obedience, and they worked. Some say those formative years carved deep scars into Vlad's soul. He came to see kindness as a weakness, mercy as a deception. His brother Radu adapted differently, gentle, charismatic, eager to please. He eventually fought for the Ottomans, but Vlad hardened. He nurtured his pain into fury, his fear into strategy. What they intended to break, they only sharpened. When he finally returned home, it was not as a boy, but as a man shaped by vengeance. Wallachia, his homeland, was not a kingdom of peace. It was a battlefield squeezed between giants. Hungary to the west, the Ottoman Empire to the east. Nobles schemed, rulers were murdered, loyalties shifted like sand. When Vlad's father was killed and his elder brother buried alive by rivals, he swore he would reclaim Wallachia and rule it with iron, so no man could ever betray him again. When Vlad finally seized the throne of Wallachia, he did not forget those who had wronged his family. He remembered well the betrayal that led to his father's death and his older brother's brutal murder. The boyars, Wallachia's powerful noble families, had played their part in the downfall of the Draculeshti line, switching allegiances as it suited them, caring more for their own power than for loyalty or justice. So, in a calculated move cloaked in civility, Vlad invited these boyars to a grand feast at his court. The invitation spoke of reconciliation and new beginnings, promising fine wine, music, and a lavish banquet to celebrate his rise to power. Eager to regain favor or simply to enjoy royal hospitality, the nobles came, dressed in their finest, expecting roasted meats, delicate fruits, and overflowing goblets. But once they were seated, the mood shifted. Soldiers surrounded the hall. The nobles were seized, stripped of their finery, and bound in chains. There was no mercy, no chance to plead. Dragged outside into the daylight, they were impaled on tall wooden stakes. Men, women, entire families. Their screams pierced the sky, and their blood soaked the earth beneath them. Vlad dined nearby, calm and composed, watching the stakes rise one by one. To him, this was justice. That night, there was indeed a feast, but it was a spectacle of terror. The message was clear. Betrayal would not be forgiven. Vlad the Impaler's reign had begun, not with celebration, but with vengeance written in blood. Impalement. The very word drips with dread. Vlad did not invent it, but he perfected it, turning a brutal method of execution into a terrifying symbol of his power. The process was slow, deliberate, and devastating. A stake, sharpened but not too sharp, was inserted through the human body, sometimes from the rectum and out through the mouth, other times straight through the chest or abdomen. The lack of sharpness was no accident. A sharper stake would lead to a quicker death, but Vlad wanted suffering. Pain was the point. He displayed his victims like grotesque decorations. Roads were lined with stakes. Entire hillsides were turned into grim galleries of death. To enemies, it was hell on earth. To his people, it was a law, brutally enforced. crime plummeted. A legend speaks of a golden cup left unguarded at a public well. According to legend, to prove how safe his land had become under his rule, Vlad placed a golden drinking cup at a public well in the capital city of Targovishte. The cup was valuable, ornate, and left unguarded, available for any passerby to drink from, and yet no one stole it. Not a thief, not a desperate beggar, not a passing traveler. The cup remained untouched throughout Vlad's reign. Why? Because people knew what would happen if they were caught in 1462. Sultan Mehmed II, the famed conqueror of Constantinople and ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world, led a vast Ottoman army into Wallachia. His mission? To crush Vlad Tepes and bring the defiant principality under Ottoman control once and for all. But what they encountered was not a traditional battlefield. Instead, outside the capital of Targovishte, they found a vision from a nightmare, a forest of impaled corpses numbering over 20,000. Men, women, even children. Each body was mounted on a towering stake, stretching for miles. The air was thick with decay. The silence was eerie. Some diplomats would later call it the forest of the impaled. The story spread like wildfire, some true, some twisted by propaganda. When Ottoman envoys refused to remove their turbans before him, saying it was their custom, Vlad smiled and ordered their turbans nailed to their skulls. When villages resisted his rule, he burned them, slaughtered their inhabitants, and impaled the survivors. His most infamous act was the night attack at Targovishte, when Vlad led a daring nighttime raid into the Ottoman camp, torching tents, killing thousands, and nearly assassinating the Sultan himself. It was said he fought like a demon, covered in blood, vanishing back into the forest before dawn. Pamphlets printed by Saxon merchants painted him as a blood-drinking cannibal who feasted among corpses, dipping his bread in their blood. Whether truth or rumor, it did not matter. The legend of Dracula was already taking shape. In 1476, Vlad's reign ended as violently as it had begun. Betrayed in battle, he was struck down, his body hacked apart by his enemies. His severed head was sent as a grim trophy to the Sultan in Constantinople, where it was displayed on a spike at the city gates, a final humiliation meant to erase his defiance and prove to the world that the dreaded Impaler was no more. But death could not silence his legend. The story of Vlad Tepes lived on, growing darker with every retelling. For his enemies, he was remembered as a bloodthirsty tyrant, a man whose cruelty knew no limits, who ruled through fear and rivers of blood. For his supporters, however, he was something else, a fierce protector of his land, a ruler who stood unflinching against the might of the Ottoman Empire when few dared to resist. Whispered in fear, written in horror, retold in shadowed halls, his name became timeless, the image of stakes rising against the sky, of cruelty so great it could terrify even the strongest armies, burned itself into history. Vlad the Impaler was gone, yet the myth he created would never die. Centuries later, in 1897, an Irish writer named Bram Stoker would give the world Count Dracula, a vampire who lived in a Transylvanian castle, feeding on the blood of the living. Stoker never traveled to Romania, but he read tales of Vlad Dracula, of forests of corpses, of blood-drenched feasts, of a man whose cruelty seemed inhuman. He borrowed the name, sprinkled in ancient folklore about the undead, and the immortal vampire was born. But if you strip away the fiction, the legend still lingers. A ruler who drank no blood, but spilled oceans of it. The vampire Count Dracula may be a creature of fiction, but the man behind the myth was terrifyingly real. A child of war, shaped by betrayal, consumed by vengeance. He built his throne on fear and carved his name into history with iron and blood. In the end, Dracula the vampire drinks blood only in stories. Vlad the Impaler spilled blood in life, and perhaps that makes the real Dracula far more terrifying.